Okay. Hi, my name is Madison McKean, and I will be presenting my oral report on, oops, sorry. I will be presenting my oral report on LDH or lactic dehydrogenase, um, the lab 3 that we have done. Let's see. Okay, for the introduction, the purpose of this experiment is to begin purifying LDH from chicken breast muscle and to measure its activity. Um, some background information is that LDH catalyzes the interconversion of lactate and pyruvate using the NAD plus and NADH. NADH absorbs light very strongly at 340 nanometers, which makes it possible to track or determine enzyme activity with a spectrophotometer. This week, we focused on the early purification steps and tested activity to prepare for further purification in future labs. Um, for methods, we homogenized the chicken tissue and performed the first centrifugation. The purpose of that was to remove any debris like unbroken cells, nuclei, or connective tissue. And the soluble proteins is what was left, like the NADH, or sorry, LDH, which was in the supernatant. Then we did the ammonium sulfate. And the purpose of doing that was to reduce protein solubility by competing for water molecules. And this is that causes proteins like LDH to salt out and precipitate. That let us concentrate our LDH and removed some unwanted proteins. After adding the ammonium sulfate, we performed a second centrifugation. The purpose of this one was to pellet LDH after precipitation and separate it from the proteins that remained soluble in the supernatant. The pellet containing LDH was then resuspended and dialysis was then performed. And the purpose of that was to remove any excess sodium, or ammonium sulfate, and other small molecules while retaining the LDH. Dialysis also exchanges the enzyme into a buffer, a good buffer. So it's ready for lab 4 for the affinity chromatography. The LDH activity assay, we use this to confirm LDH activity. So we measured at 340 nanometers. And again, we use this because NADH strongly absorbs at this wavelength, whereas NAD plus does not. And as LDH converts pyruvate to lactate, NAD plus is then reduced to NADH, and that is where we get our signal. Um, we used the kinetics mode on the spectrometer so that it'll show the rate of NADH formation, which shows when LDH activity is happening. So if we get a good slope, there's activity, and if we don't get a slope or a very little slope, then there's not much activity happening. Um, this is the results that we got from this experiment. This table shows our slopes for different samples recorded at 340 nanometers. The original sample was the one the TA ran in lab. Um, he used a 1 to 100 dilution and he got a slope of 0.0229, and then we calculated like the 5% of that, and we got 0.00115. And that kind of just shows the minimum of like where the reaction is occurring or happening. And then we ran our sample and we got a slope of 0.0144, which shows that there is LDH activity helping or happening. Um, and that just helped to confirm that the reaction was working. Um, as for the discussion, oop, as for the discussion, um, our results show that the LDH activity was happening during this experiment. A good strength of this experiment is that it works that and we're able to see LDH activity at 340 nanometers. A limitation is that we only recorded slope values and didn't perform any extra data analysis, as this was just a step in the purification process. Um, using Going back to the methods where the dialysis portion was mentioned, that sets us up for the next week, lab 4, which is affinity chromatography, and that'll do more with what we have already gotten. So in conclusion, the first centrifugation removed debris and any insoluble material. The second centrifugation pelleted the LDH after the ammonium sulfate precipitation. The ammonium sulfate was it precipitated concentrated LDH by salting it out. And um, LDH activity assay was measured at 340 nanometers because the NADH absorbs at that wavelength, and it also provides a reliable activity measure. Um, Dialysis removed excess salts and prepared the sample for week 4. And yeah, this experiment showed that LDH activity was active, and it is now allowing us to continue on with our purification. And for references, I used the Lab 3 handout purification of lactase dehydrogenase from chicken breast muscle and the oral report guidelines for Chem 4363.